Welcome to the Draft Professor Podcast Network. This is the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. I would like to remind you of who is bringing you daily draft content. Randall Slifer, Josh Townsend, Jake Robertson, Bill Sparks, Parker Blake, Brock Vieira, Newt Weston, Devin Jackson, David Neese, Jacob Roach, Owen, Jared Zhang, Dean Bruce, Brian Maffey. Without these individuals, we could not bring you daily draft content covering the top 175 players in the NFL draft. Thank you for watching, and we'll be with you in a few seconds.
All right, hey everybody, how we doing? It is Randall Slifer here and Mr. Bill Sparks, and we're going to be talking about cornerbacks and wide receivers today, like every usual Friday, which we love. Bill, how you doing today?
I am doing great, Randall. I'm excited to talk to some corners and some wide receivers tonight, including one of them that has been a my guy throughout this process. Every draft analyst has that my guy. It's my guy, and I know you've got one in this episode too that you're going to pound the table for. Or go through it because you're a Bills fan, either one. But first, let's give a quick shout out to everybody watching. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the Draft Professor YouTube channel. We've got all sorts of draft content, all sorts of players that we talk about, from running backs and linebackers to hog mollies to edges and everything in between. So make sure you give us a subscribe to that. In addition, as you may or may not have noticed, our usual host, Jim, is not with us tonight. He's on the road, but Jim, we miss you, and we hope we can do you proud with this one.
I bet he's watching.
He probably is. He's probably got it popped up on the DVD player in his van right now.
Yeah, Western New York, you eat wings and then you buckle in. It's probably 2 degrees where he is. But let's dive in. We're going to start with the cornerbacks, and we're going to start with Devin Kirkwood, and I'm going to let you take it over, Bill.
Absolutely. Devin Kirkwood, 6'3", 205 from UCLA. I mean, here's a guy, when we talk about instincts and anticipation from cornerbacks, this is a guy that's up there in terms of his instincts and anticipations. He really does very well in zone coverage, especially when he keeps the action in front of him. He has a very tall frame and long arms. So not only is he 6'3", 205, but he's really wiry. Right. And he's got that long arms that helps him keep wide receivers at bay in press coverage. But he also has the ability to add mass. So even though he's 205, he could probably add another 15, 20 pounds and it not be an issue. The big knocks on him for me, though, is his feet. His back pedal gets really sloppy. It does. Sometimes he's almost tripping over himself when he has to back pedal. In run support, he can be inconsistent in getting off of blocks. Sometimes he fires right off the block and gets right in there. Other times, it's a little tough. For me, Devin Kirkwood is in my top 175. He's right around late round 5. Reminds me a lot of Martin Emerson Jr. As a Cleveland Brown fan. I love me some Emerson Jr. I love me some Devin Kirkwood. So I think this is the guy day 3 teams are going to be looking for. But Randall, what do you see from Devin?
I saw a lot of the same in there. He's 6'3", 205. If he does add mass, that would be a little bit interesting for me, taking it he is sitting at 205 on the outside. His low vert, from what I've seen in a couple of reports, kind of scares me a little bit, even though he is 6'3". I really like his motor. He moves side to side really fast, and he's kind of all over on the field, which I think is where he kind of fits in the NFL, is his motor and size is what's really good. You're right, once he does get off those blocks, which, we hope it is more frequently than what we've seen, he is a sound tackler. He's got 20 tackles, and his missed tackle rate's under 10% with 10 defensive stops when he's up on the line. But also he is used in pass rush, which I love. So in quarterback blitzes, they love to use him because of his size and his weight on that. And he has 2 pressures, including a sack. The sack was a lot of fun to watch. So as an NFL team, I'd love to see him being used in that. I am worried about his penalties. He does, I feel like sometimes when he's in his back pedal, and he does get tripped up, like you mentioned, then he gets kind of nervous, and then he kind of grabs. He's had 8 penalties in the last 2 years. I was trying to find them. Most of them were for holding. So I am concerned about that. You're right. I have him right in that 175. I think the ability to add mass, which you just mentioned, which is kind of a game changer. I kind of like that. I'm kind of processed that through my head because at 205, I didn't even look at it. I was like, okay, well, he's 205. He'll be 205.
Right.
But adding the mass could really work, and I think that would be nice. And putting him just kind of in multiple spots in the NFL, and I got him in the top 175 too.
Right, absolutely. I think also when you think about the adding mass, even though he's listed as a corner, I think he could add mass and play safety, especially some box safety.
Yes, that's what I was thinking too. He played free safety a little bit, but obviously I think if you could develop him into free safety and strong safety and then maybe lean towards that strong safety, that'd be nice. Or a team that doesn't really have those positions. They both play together.
Right. They both play together. I think if he adds that mass, you could probably put him in a safety position, like a safety rover role almost, maybe some nickel corner, maybe even some slot as well. So I think if he stays at the weight he's at, he's fine. He just might get pushed around with being a little bit of a leaner frame at 205. But I think if he adds that mass, now you've opened up the door for him to potentially play safety, which, NFL defensive coordinators will love a guy like that can play both.
Right. Combine interviews would be awesome for him to talk about that.
Absolutely.
All right, let's hit the next cornerback. We're going to move to Jacob Parrish.
All righty. So Jacob Parrish from Kansas State. So we're talking 5'10". I've seen his weight kind of all over the place. It's between 183, 198. Some big things for me. I really love, even though the weight's kind of all over the place,
his one-on-one.
You got 198?
Yeah, I got 198.
Yeah. We'll go 198. I've seen it 183 to 198. I've even some places list him at 200. So that's going to be one of the things I'm going to look for. Combine time and Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl, getting an accurate measurement. Some really good things that I've seen from him is his one-on-one tackling, especially he's a downhill hitter, thumper at the cornerback position, even though he's 5'10", 180, 190, smaller guy, but he can really lay the wood. A flip inverse from Devin Kirkwood and how Devin's back pedal was kind of sloppy. Jacob Parrish doesn't have that. He's got very clean footwork. It's very nice. It's very neat. He also has very good success, especially in shallow and intermediate. When you start getting into those deeper ends of the water, he starts to fade off. And I don't know if that's a long speed concern or if that's just a mechanics concern. It's going to bear some needing to watch. Some concerns for me, obviously, his awareness and football IQ. He has it in some cases, especially in zone coverage, but in man coverage, it seems like it falls off a little bit. All that said, he's still in my top 175. He sits right there in round 5. If I had to comp him, probably like an Avonte Maddox from the Philadelphia Eagles back in that day, where he was a really good thumper, really good zone corner, probably needed a little bit of help in man coverage. But Randall, what'd you see out of Jacob's tape?
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to piggyback pretty much what you said on that point, because I do agree. He's a tackling machine, and that's what I kind of love about him. He has 50 total tackles this year. He has 93 in the past 2 years, and he has under a 10% missed tackle rate. So he's a sound tackler, and he gets down. He was this year on those 50 total tackles. He's accredited for 18 defensive stops on the line, so stopping those offenses, which is great. He does. You're right. He does get thrown. He gets thrown a lot in college. He's gotten 146 targets thrown at him in 2 years, but he has allowed under 900 yards, which is a little high, but still impressive, getting 146 targets on there. He does have 5 interceptions with 11 pass blocks with that in the last 2 years, but he does allow 4 touchdowns, and all of those have come from deeper shots. So he does get lost sometimes in the back. He's much better at zone. Watching his tape was a lot of fun. His Arizona State tape was a lot of fun. He was flying all over the place, had pretty good coverage, and he had a pass rush that was really good as well. He got held by the tight end, but nobody called it. He got off that tight end and still was the first person to the quarterback. So that motor was really fun to watch, and I enjoyed watching that. I see him. Do you see him as an outside cornerback, or are you looking? I'm kind of looking at a nickel defender in a mid-day 3.
I'm looking solely slot in the nickel. I don't think he's got the size to play that boundary. Yeah, especially if he falls closer to that 180. This is a guy that's not going to have that frame. Let me ask you this: did you end up watching any of the Iowa State tape for him by chance?
Yeah.
Did it seem weird to you that he almost just disappeared outside of those 2 pass deflections? Like there was just no help from him in run support, or was that just me?
No, I saw that, and I kind of took it like I was watching, and he kind of just I guess disappeared is a good word for it. And I had the 2 PBUs. But then I kind of was watching it and then watching Arizona State tape right after it. So then I kind of like moved on and watched that Arizona State tape. But what did you get from that?
It just seemed almost like he was almost out of his element, especially against Iowa State. Especially, it seemed like anytime he would get near the line, it seemed like they would almost kind of run away from him, is what I saw. But the big concern was it seemed like anytime he was thrown near him, obviously the 2 pass deflections, but it seemed like anytime it was thrown near him, almost like he might have been playing with an injury, and that's pure speculation on my part. But it just seemed like they went away from him, and then when they would go towards him, he just would either push him out of bounds or they get out of bounds quickly just to avoid his tackling. So it bears watching, because when you see a guy who's very productive in tackling like that, and then you see a game like Iowa State and it just shocks you like that,
right?
You're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So I'm hoping that that's just a one-off and it's not a consistent thing, because that's the only game I've seen that on tape. So his postseason bowl game, and then obviously any future postseason games are going to be key for me.
No, I agree. I took it as a one-off as well. I like that.
Yep.
All right. Let's move on. We're going to move on to Jordan Hancock, Ohio State. Let's go.
Oh, all right. Jordan Hancock, Ohio State, 6'1", 195. The big thing, he's very fluid in his change of direction skills, especially in man coverage. He has great route recognition, great anticipation, especially when he's jumping those underneath routes. Shows really good football IQ. He's able to diagnose plays in the secondary, communicate adjustments. He's also a very effective blitzer from the slot. You see him fly, especially on a quarterback blitz from that slot. Shows a willingness and a good technique to support the run. Some weaknesses for me, though. He is lean, 6'1", 195. It sounds pretty heavy, but it's a lean 195. You can see it in the picture there. He also does sometimes rely on grabbing when he's beaten. He gets very handsy, very grabby. It's going to lead to some penalties at the next level. His tackling technique, even though he is a willing run defender, it's very inconsistent, especially in open field situations. Open field, it just seems too many broken tackles. In addition to that, he's got a little bit of a length issue, and it's going to cause an issue in press coverage. All that being said, Jordan Hancock's another guy. He's in my top 175, right around that same range, probably right around round 4, round 5. I'm going to throw a Buffalo's Bills comp out there for you. Rasul Douglas is what I get from Jordan Hancock. I'll also throw this out there, and I'll let you follow it up. I think Jordan might be a better safety than a cornerback at the next level. But Randall, what do you think about Jordan?
Okay, so yes, I see him more as a safety than a cornerback. And the funny thing is that when you're comping him to Rasul, I've had conversations with people on Twitter about Buffalo and what we're going to do in 2025 and 2026. And we've been talking about, what if Rasul moves to safety and then we draft a cornerback sort of thing, because Rasul is that size and can kind of do that as well. So that was an insanely good comp for him. But yeah, I mean, I see him more as a safety. He is a ball hawk, turnover machine. He has four forced fumbles in the last 2 years and 3 interceptions while only allowing 1 touchdown, which I do love that. His IQ is high. He tries to cut people off, but while mirroring receivers at the same time. The versatility is what I kind of make him as a safety. In Penn, before he transferred over, in Penn State, he played strong safety. In Oregon, when he played against Oregon, he played slot cornerback. And then in Penn State, he played strong safety. Both were good, sound games. And I preferred him in the Oregon game and slot cornerback. And I thought he was more impactful then, but he still played well at strong safety. So that was interesting to watch. I do agree with you on the tackling. He's super physical, but I feel like sometimes, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, is that sometimes he absorbs too much contact and then falls back, but still maintains the tackle. But it seems like it hurt him a decent amount. So I'd rather let him learn how to tackle better than the way he tackles now.
I agree with you. It just feels like it almost is like a crash dummy. Right. In like a car crash, the same kind of whiplash back and forth, and he still takes them down, but I don't think it's necessarily him tackling them down. I think it's more of them just, hey, momentum. I just hit a brick wall and I just fell.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, but obviously I think that's easy to teach and stuff like that. And I do love his pass rushing as well. He has 29 pass rushing snaps in the last 2 seasons with 7 pressures and 3 sacks. So I do see him as a safety, and I had him actually as a good late as a good one. Basically, at the end of day 2, I had Jordan Hancock going. So I have him a little higher, I believe, than you do. But as long with his versatility, I think people like his versatility where he can go and be a whole DB central person and then learn more from there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I had him a little lower. It was right around round 4, round 5 where I had him, but I think he's gonna be one of those guys that we watch on day 2, day 3 of the NFL draft as names are scrolling across the screen, and you'll see him go somewhere, but you won't really get a full breakdown of who he is till you get into training camp. But I think this is a guy, if I drafted him, it would be to either play nickel slot corner or make the move to safety. I just think he's a better safety. And granted, obviously, Ohio State didn't need him at safety because, they have Caleb Downs, who's another player we'll probably talk about next year as a top 5 guy. Yeah. But I think Jordan Hancock would be a better safety than he would be a corner.
Agreed. And like Buffalo Bills, like Cam Lewis is just a utility guy that just jumps in. I think that's what his rookie year could be.
Right. Exactly.
All right. Now we're moving on to Noel Williams from California.
Noel Williams from California, 6'1", 200 pounds. The big thing about Noel is he does have efficient play speed. It's not the fastest thing in the world. He's not going to burn the doors off of somebody with his play speed, but he does have very good hand usage at the line of scrimmage, which I love. He's a good press corner. He can open his hips very quickly, very good in press man coverage, very good foot speed, very good back pedal, very crisp. You don't have to worry about any sort of mechanics with him there. He does also have a very good valuability in special teams versatility. So as a return specialist, he can return kicks for you, return punts for you. So the big things, obviously, for him that I would want to see, obviously, we talked about long speed's a bit of a concern. He's not going to burn the doors off of things. In addition to that, he has secure tackling, but just like we talked about with Jordan Hancock, it just seems like there's too many missed tackles in open field situations. This is another guy, again, in my top 175. He's right around that round 4, round 5 range for me. And I'm going to go a little old school with the comp here. I'm going to throw it back to a yesteryear. This is Al Harris from the Eagles and Packers. That same style of corner, very physical kind of guy, good man coverage, not going to light the world on fire. For me, I would love to see him. I believe he has 1 year left of eligibility. I'd love to see him come back for another year, but I completely understand if he wants to declare for the draft. But Randall, what'd you see from Mr. Williams' tape?
Yeah, I saw a lot of the same, of course. The kick returning I did love about it, and I do think that if he declares, that's where he gets into that 4 to 5 range because of his versatility in there. He had an 80-yard kick return this year, which was a really good return as well. He does have a really good IQ. He does lead the league in 7 interceptions and consistently getting interceptions every year. Out of 21 opportunities, he has 14 interceptions in his college career, so that's pretty nuts. Only 7 of them are not. He does play mainly outside corner, but he does get put in the box a lot. To piggyback on that rough tackling, he did have 2023 was a really bad year for him. He had a missed tackle rate of about 20%. It was kind of brutal watching him try to tackle. I did see some form increase in this year, and he has dropped it down to under 5%. He had 43 tackles in 2023. He has 36 tackles in 2024, so it's not like there was much jump off on those numbers, but then really got that missed tackle rate lower. So it was good to see him improve on that. He does get penalties as well. I feel like this is a consistent thing with this group that we're talking about, but he had 8 penalties in 2020 or 2022, has 7 in the past 2 years. So he's trying to get better, and he is getting better year by year. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does stay for 1 more year to up his stock, because he could turn that round 4 or 5 into a round 2 or 3 guy sort of thing. If he does stay another year, are you looking at him entering the transfer portal or staying in Cal?
I would. That's a great question. I wouldn't be surprised if he entered the transfer portal, but I also wouldn't be opposed to him staying. I mean, in the last 2 years at Cal, he's got 9 interceptions. So clearly what that defensive staff is doing is working for him, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see him parlay a 7 interception season into a larger school.
Right.
If I were him, I would take a trip down the coast to the Big Ten, either to USC or UCLA, get some more eyes on him, because that's going to be a big thing. They're going to, when they look at his first 3 seasons at UNLV, obviously you have a level of competition question. Anytime you go to those smaller schools, it's an issue, right?
Right.
Cal's a step up from UNLV, but obviously Cal is not USC. So I think if he doesn't declare and he stays in school, I think he needs to hit the transfer portal and just take another step up to another level.
I agree.
I could see it either way for him.
Yep, completely agree. But I do like his motor, and I do like his chippiness. When he's up against wide receivers and there's a run, he holds on to his wide receivers, and he'll be like an offensive lineman where he'll do like the double slam on the ground. I like his aggressiveness.
Yep, absolutely. I love him. That's why he reminds me of like the Al Harris of yesteryear. He's a very aggressive, gritty corner.
Yeah.
So he's going to get him some fans among the NFL draft space, especially who like those grittier. I call them the lunch pail guys. Just grab the lunch pail, throw on the hard hat, and go to work. But I think ultimately, he needs one more year of seasoning.
Sounds good. All right, let's move on to our next one. Oh, the big boy, Will Johnson. Bill, all you.
The main event of cornerbacks, Will Johnson, University of Michigan, 6'2", 202. Big thing, he's got exceptional size and length at 6'2", 202. I mean, you look at the long arms in the photo here and looks crazy. He also has a very good short area quickness and a change of direction ability that's near elite in this class. Very fluid hips, can flip and run with receivers vertically with ease. He's got the long speed to carry him down the field as well, so you don't have to worry about that. Very quick processor who recognizes route combinations very easily. He's not fooled by any sort of route changes, hot routes, or anything at the line of scrimmage. Very versatile. He can play man. He can play zone. He can be in press coverage. Whatever you need him, he can do. The big things that I have on him is he can be over-aggressive in coverage. He can get very handsy, which leads to big penalties. He also sometimes relies too heavily on his athleticism. I know he's a good athlete, but he's got good technique. Sometimes he just needs to let his technique show. His tackling technique and his angles in run support, inconsistent at times. Sometimes I saw him taking bad angle. I saw him taking a shoulder tackle when he could have easily wrapped someone up. He can be a step slow when locating and tracking the ball. Sometimes tracking the ball and those back shoulder throws, it can be an issue. That all being said, this is a top 5, top 8 player in this class and is cornerback number 2 on my board behind Travis Hunter. Yes, I have Travis Hunter as a cornerback on my big board. Reminds me a lot of Joey Porter Jr. for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That same style of corner, very good at any coverage that you need him. He's going to get handsy, so you get ready for those flags. I think right now, if he falls out of the top 10, there's a serious problem. I think his absolute floor right now would be probably right around pick 9 or 10 to the New York Jets. That is his absolute floor if the draft order stays the same today. But Randall, what do you see from Will Johnson?
Definitely, yeah. So if he goes to the Jets and you got Will Johnson and Sauce Gardner on each side, both handsy and both good man coverage, that'd be interesting to figure out what wide receiver the quarterback's thrown at. But yeah, I agree. I mean, his father played DB at Michigan, so that's why obviously he went to Michigan, and he's got that bloodline, which is great. He played basketball as well as wide receiver and DB, so he's just an athlete in general. Had a huge impact for the national champions last year. 27 tackles, 4 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, including a pick 6. Only allowed 267 total yards that whole season. The most he gave up, I think, in his college career is 83 yards in a game, and his best passer rating on a QB was 52. So he's an island in himself. I do agree that while his back pedal and fluid hip turn is good and as athlete as he is, the 3 things he does have to fine tune are exactly what you said. I think tackling is the number 1 for sure. And then locating the ball is number 2. But I would say locating the ball is above average. I do think he's got to work on his hand fighting on press man. I think like sometimes he can get beat on that. But those are above average, and then tackling is average. And I agree that that's one thing that is out of being a top 10 pick is something that I believe is not top 10 pick quality, but close to it sort of thing. So he can work on that. But he's a top 10 pick. I agree. I hope he doesn't go to the Jets. Absolutely not. He can rush the quarterback as well, credited for 3 pressures. I like everything about him. It's hard to scout and evaluate a top 10 cornerback because he's so clean and so well done.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this, Randall. Do you have any concerns with this quote unquote injury that he's suffering, or do you think it's just more Michigan just wants to have him shut his season down without actually saying they're shutting his season down?
I think it's that for sure. Taking it, I think coming off to a slow start and then them talking probably behind closed curtains, knowing that he was probably at the beginning of the year a top 10 pick regardless. They just had an honest conversation with him to look at his future. So I think they went that route.
That's what I think too. I know there's some people out there that are concerned that they think medicals might be a yellow flag, and I don't see that. I think it's more they're trying to essentially save face at Michigan by saying, "Hey, we're going to shut down our top player," rather than him risking an injury or even worse, reducing his draft stock. But I don't think there's any way that he falls out of the top 10. I mean, right now, looking at Tankathon's current order, the Jets would be 6th. I think that's probably where he lands. I think his absolute floor would probably be number 9 to the Saints. I think if he ends up in New Orleans, would be another great fit. Where do you think he should end up?
I mean, the Jets would work. I think New Orleans is the better. Well, no, because that's bias. Both are good. I know the Jets do need him on that other side. So I think 6 is the good pick. But yeah, I think it is. And with the injuries, it's very funny because I was trying to find that. Trying to find that out to see what it was. And I got into Michigan Reddit and I was trying to find that out. And, even though it was a smart move, Michigan fans aren't happy about it.
No, I've seen everything from turf toe to broken metatarsals in his feet to ankle injuries. Nobody's actually pinpointed what the actual injury is, which makes me believe that they're just shutting him down without actually shutting him down.
100%. But I do agree. I think probably the Jets at 6 would probably be best because Travis Hunter will go 1. And I have him as is he your CB2? Yeah. Because he's my CB2.
Yeah. Will Johnson's my CB2. I think after those two, after Travis Hunter and Will Johnson, it now becomes a question mark because you look at the next guys that we've talked about: Siobhan Revel, ACL tear, Ben Morrison, hip injury, Tacario Davis. There's rumors of him going back to school next year. So those are the next 3 guys. So the Travis Hunter and Will Johnson are clear corner 1, corner 2, and then after that, it's going to get very murky in this cornerback class. So, but yeah, I think he's a clear number 2. I don't think there's any way he passes Travis Hunter short of Travis Hunter losing a foot on the football field at this point.
Agreed. Very much agreed. All right, now let's shift to our wide receivers, and we're going to start with Ricky White. I'm going to let you start, Bill, and then I'll chime in.
Absolutely, because I know this is one of your guys. But before we dive into wide receivers, I want to remind everybody, thank you for coming out with us tonight to talk some cornerbacks and some wide receivers. If you haven't already, make sure you like the episode. Make sure you subscribe to the Draft Professor channel. We've got all sorts of NFL draft content, from scouting reports like we're doing tonight to snap count assessments to a whole host of other NFL draft options. And we appreciate you spending your Friday nights with us. You can also follow me on X at Sparks Scouting. You can follow my friend Randall Slifer up top there at Randall Slifer on X. Without further ado, now let's dive in to Ricky White from UNLV, 6'1", 190. This is a guy, he's going to consistently win on those deep ball, those vertical routes. He is a go. He is a, hey, just go run in a straight line to the end zone and we'll get you the ball there. But he also does have advanced route skills on intermediate routes too. Crossers deep over the middle. I know we talked about a snippet that you had over on X earlier where he made 4 defenders look crazy over the middle. I believe it was the Syracuse game. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That is right.
But he's very dynamic after the catch. He is also alignment versatile. He's a guy you can use in the slot. You can use him on the boundary. I think he's best in the slot, but on screens, sweeps, all sorts of things like that. Also has a very natural body control through the catch point, especially against the boundary. He's a guy that's going to be able to stretch out for that ball. The big weakness, though, is the frame. 6'1", 190. He is a bit on the lighter side. We can't overlook that. He also does show some stiffness on his breaks on short area routes, especially in the quick game. It's almost like that car in cold weather that takes a minute to start up and get running. That's what I see from Ricky White. Same concept. I would also like to see his release package get developed, especially against press coverage. Seems like sometimes it's his releases, I'm just going to run by you, which may or may not work at the NFL level. But all in all, this is a guy, he's in my top 175. I'm a little lower on him because of the frame. He's right around that late round 5, early round 6 range. Reminds me a lot of Darnell Mooney from the Atlanta Falcons. A very good wide receiver, too, that's a speedster that's going to light the world on fire. But Randall, I know this is one of my guys for this class, so I'm going to let you go ahead and tear into Ricky White's tape.
Perfect. Because, I love Ricky White. And honestly, the scouting report is I'm just going to send it to Brandon Beane because it almost sounds like the whole scouting report is because I want him on the Buffalo Bills. But
yep.
I mean, for starters, the one thing that Buffalo loves and what most NFL teams should is special teams contributor as a rookie. And this man has 4 block punts in his collegiate career, and that is impressive. And then and then I know it's UNLV, but I do feel like UNLV pumps out like 1 or 2 guys a year that are extremely talented into the draft, and they end up going. But his production is always there. In 2023, he had 88 catches for almost 1,500 yards. He had 5 straight 100-yard games. 2024, he's got 74 catches for over 1,000 yards, and he also has 5 100-yard games, not consecutively, but still has those 5. He has 11 touchdowns this year, 8 last year. He's finding the end zone consistently. The issue, with your remark to go, and we'll get you the ball, the one knock on him for those go routes is his contested catches, and his vertical is not in the highest degree. So he needs to separate to catch those go balls, and it's hard for him to come up on like a big X receiver and catch those balls. So to complete his catches, he has to have that separation. He is, just like you said, he's a savvy route runner. His intermediates are a lot of fun. His shorts do need a little work, but he can work on those curl routes, and it looks really well. The Syracuse game was the one game that kind of stuck out for me because it was up against pretty good competition with Fran Brown and everybody, and he did hold on and had a really good game with a lot of curls and sits, and then a lot of deep crossers. Deep crossers are kind of my thing. I love those deep crossers because it definitely opens up the outside and on the flat. So I do like his deep crossers, and that's kind of what Buffalo needs. And when you're talking about a slim frame, to be honest, what I saw in a lot of his games is his awareness of his frame and and my favorite thing, obviously, is availability is the best ability. I see a lot of times where he is near the first down marker and he'll just get it and run out. Kind of like what Tyler Lockett does in the NFL, and why Tyler Lockett's been around the league for so long is he does not, we love physicality and grit, but wide receivers get hit a lot, and he knows that. So he'll step out of bounds if he needs to. He won't try to get those 3 extra yards, and I'm personally okay with that. He knows where the first down marker is and obviously where the pylon is based on how many touchdowns he has. He has 162 catches in the past 2 years, and he's been credited for 105 first downs. And that's probably my favorite stat with him for sure.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. Obviously, you're going to say Buffalo, but if I had to handicap you and say Brandon Beane is not selecting Ricky White in the NFL draft, which of the other 31 squads do you want to see Ricky land on?
Let's see. I would think, because I haven't even thought about this because I just know I just want him to go to Buffalo. Obviously, with timing and speed, Miami works because his route running is savvy and his timing so good that Tua and Mike McDaniel would love that. Taking it Tua has, either trolling or he might retire or things like that. He could take a little bit of Tyreek's workload and things like that if he doesn't retire. I think Carolina could use him because Xavier Legette is a good X that can contribute, but then take some of that off his plate as well when Xavier kind of uses that Z. I could also see him in Tennessee. Where would you like him? Cleveland?
So well, obviously Cleveland, but I handicapped you for the homer pick, so I can't do it for myself. Tennessee would be my number one option, but my second option, and this is a sneaky one, Denver. Throw him in the slot next to Cortland Sutton and Sean Payton offense because Sean Payton's going to be able to use him very effectively. I think that's a very sneaky fit that people probably should be on the lookout for Ricky White.
Okay, now I'm afraid that he's not going to Buffalo because Denver is a very good call as well.
Sean Payton's watching the podcast right now, and he's going to call me after, like, why are you giving away my secrets?
Right. He is Sean Payton's guy. A great call. Great call.
Absolutely.
All right. Where did you had him? I do have him higher because, he's obviously my guy. I'm fair enough to say that I think mid round 3. But I wouldn't be surprised if we use one of our second at like pick 64.
Okay. Yeah. He was right around round 4 or 5, like late 4, early 5 is where I have him. I know I'm lower on him because of that frame concern. Obviously I can't sit here and say he's a very talented guy, but you said it best. The best ability is availability. And while he's been healthy to this point, guys like Devontae Smith in Philly, the smaller guys, they have concerns about how it's going to translate to the next level. So I'm lower on him because of that, but I think if he stays healthy for the first couple of years of his career, we're all going to look back at this draft class and be like, why wasn't he taken in the top 64 picks?
For sure. Love it. All right. We're going Will Sheppard.
Will Sheppard from Colorado. So 6'3", 205. The big thing with Will Sheppard, he's a very fluid route runner, snaps in and out of breaks very well. He's got a really good leverage IQ. This is a guy that finds holes in the zone and just seems to sit down in them very well for Shedeur Sanders. He's got a wide catch radius. He's got what I call a zip code catch radius. If it is in his vicinity, he is going to catch it, which is another good thing because he doesn't necessarily rely on body catches too much. He's also been very consistently productive in his career, so you don't have to worry about a level of competition question. He also shows really reliable hands in traffic. He is a guy that is willing to go over the middle of the field and do that nitty-gritty, dirty work. He's also a very vertical threat, and not necessarily in terms of his speed as a burner, but also the way he's able to stack defenders up and then run by them. The opposite side of that, the weaknesses for him, though, he doesn't have that top-end speed, so it's not like he's going to blow the doors off in terms of his speed. He does have good size, but play strength is a concern. Obviously, especially on blocking schemes. It seems like he plays smaller and weaker than his 6'3", 205 frame would indicate. Age can be a factor. This is going to be a bit of an older prospect. So some NFL teams may say, hey, this is all you're going to get out of Will Sheppard. This is what he is from his development cycle. All that being said, this is a guy in my top 175. I am concerned as well as intrigued on his 40 time, either at the Combine, Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl. I believe he's got one of those bowl invites, but I want to see what his 40 time is going to be because that's a big deciding factor. If I had to compare him, Cincinnati fans, T. Higgins. This is your T. Higgins replacement if T walks. You can get him rounds 4, rounds 5, and replace him with that. As far as a 40 time for him, I've seen roughly 4.5, 4.49. I think if he runs anything 4.5 plus, it's a concern. Anything under 4.5, he's golden. But Randall, what'd you see from Will Sheppard's tape?
Yeah, I thought the same, to be honest with you, but I think he is going to run a 4.5. I think a 4.55 won't hurt his stock gravely, sort of thing, kind of like a Gabe Davis when he ran a 4.55 sort of thing where it did stark it, but his talent still got him drafted, I believe, in the 3rd round. So that I don't think it's a crazy concern. He is a vertical monster, and he high points the ball. I mean, in high school, he has a track record for the high jump at 6'8" for a high jump, which is insane. He's a touchdown machine. In college, he has 27 touchdowns in 4 years. In high school, he had 33 touchdowns. He is a hard worker, and that's what I kind of love about him and where I think he's going to succeed in the NFL. He started at Vandy, and freshman year, all he did was special teams, earned a role on the wide receiver side, became a really good wide receiver for Vandy to transfer into Colorado from a 3-star to a 4-star. So the grit and hard working is really going to transfer into the NFL, and I do love that. I agree with your zone coverage. You're correct on that. And then obviously his vertical, I mean, I believe I posted yesterday on Twitter his catch where it was Shedeur Sanders running to the right, and he made that catch in the end zone. That was a moon ball, an absolute moon ball. And he located that ball looking straight up and came down with it with a wide receiver on his shoulder. And that was a 55-yard bomb. It's impressive what he comes down with, and he seems like he comes down with it at all. His contested catches are incredible. He always comes down with it. Let's see, he has 13. And when you're talking about the intermediate routing, he does those deep crossers, and then he evades instead of much of a bruiser, even though he can bruise. But he has 13 forced missed tackles on those intermediate passes and short ones, and he can break off that first DB and take off. I do think he is going to run a 4.5 because I see his speed after he breaks that first tackle, and he does have that quick motor. So I see him. I think he's one of the top elite vertical threats in the league, and I kind of have him at the same spot as you do.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Is there any concern from you about some of his production this season? And when I say that, he would go from a game against a team, 5-6 catches, 70 yards and 2 touchdowns to the next game like Kansas, 1 catch, 10 yards. And then he'd have another game where he blows up, and then another game, 1 catch, 5 yards. Is there any concern from you in that aspect, or is it just a matter of play style and structure for the game plan?
I think it's play style and structure 100%. I think Colorado with Shedeur and Travis Hunter and the talent that they have on that offense, I think it's just kind of there's one ball for everybody sort of thing. So I didn't find that concerning. I just saw it as that what Colorado does on a consistent basis. They did that last year as well when you're looking at wide receiver stats, pumping through those, and it was up and down, up and down, up and down. So I don't have a concern with that at all.
Okay. I don't either. I know it's been mentioned in the draft Twitter spaces by some detractors from Colorado, Colorado players as a whole. I didn't see any of that. I think it was more of just play style and structure, but I know it's been brought up, and I know especially as we get into combine, GMs are going to ask that question about, hey, why weren't you as productive in this game as you were in the other games? Granted, Kansas, he could easily say, well, they have Cobee Bryant. Have you not seen him play? If you haven't, you should go watch the Mrs. Are Relevant podcast where Randall and Bill talked about him. But a nice little segue into a plug there. But no, I don't think it's an issue, but I wanted to see if I was alone on that island.
No, because his techniques are good. He does sometimes get out of the picture, and then you start not to notice him on those games. But I don't think it's on a consistent basis. Like we're saying, that whole game he played bad. He obviously has some poor streaks once in a while, and they do streak 1-2 drive sort of thing, but he always kind of makes his way back, at least separating, even if the ball's not thrown to him and stuff like that. I think that's more than fine. I think that's more a play scheme, but sometimes he does one or two drives, just kind of doesn't take off. Like it's not laziness. It's more or less just like, he just doesn't win. And it's just not 100% all the time.
Right. Just not his night, which is fine from a wide receiver. A guy it would be your Robin to your Batman. This is a wide receiver too. He doesn't have to win every night. He doesn't need to be that guy. But he did, and just to reiterate on this, he did accept a Shrine Bowl invite, which it seems like 3/4 of the Colorado roster is going to the Shrine Bowl at this point. Yeah. I feel like it's going to be the Colorado Bowl with everybody that's going there, but I'm excited to see him in Dallas at the Shrine Bowl.
Same. All right. Iowa State, Jalen Knoll.
All right. Iowa State, Jalen Knoll, 5'11", 200 pounds. The big thing, he's got very good short area quickness, very sharp cuts, very crisp routes. This is what Jalen Knoll is going to do. He also showcases a really savvy route running beyond his ears, head fakes, body leans. He gets defenders. It's almost like the ankle breaker in basketball. He's going to get you leaning one way, and then he is gone the other way. He also has, I call it a my ball mentality. This is my ball. I am going to take it from you, especially in contested catch situations. He's also a special teams ace. He's a 4-down contributor. He can play outside on the boundary. He can play in the slot. He can kick return. He can punt return. He can do it all for you. He's also very durable, and he's increased his production each season. Year over year, his production's increased, which shows his development is the best could be yet to come for Jalen. Obviously, 5'11", 200 pounds. He's a little bit on the lighter side in terms of playing on the boundary at the next level. I think he's probably going to get relegated to the slot, probably as a kick returner, as a punt returner. He can get knocked off his route running by physical corners. I saw folks that pressed him up at the line of scrimmage, knocked him off his route a little too easy. There are some focus drops that have popped up on his tape for me, especially over the middle, almost like he's bracing for that contact and drops the ball in advance of it, almost like you hear the footsteps drop. But all that being said, I still think that this is a guy, he's in my top 175, right around the early parts of day 3. I compared him to a Hunter Renfrow from the Raiders, that same kind of nitty gritty slot guy that can do it all for you, especially in kick returns and punt returns. He can do a little bit of everything for you. But Randall, what'd you see on Jalen's tape?
Yeah, that was very good comp. I definitely agree with that. But yeah, explosive plays. And that's why I think it's going to be the most intriguing. I do believe once the offseason hits that his highlight reels are going to start coming out because he has a lot of explosive plays. In 2023, he had 4 50-plus yard receptions, 2 50-yard kick returns, 2 30-yard punt returns. He's all over the place. His deep shots are impressive. He does have that quickness. He caught 11 20-plus yard throws for 506 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also has 137 yards after the catch, and the tape shows that he separates well. So he's getting those yards not because he can evade that much. It's because he's separated 1 to 2 yards to begin with, and then he can just start taking off. He works well in the middle of the field. He has 5 touchdowns this year, with 2 of them coming from those 20-plus throws, which is impressive. So he's not working just on the outside. He's got a good inside post. His concentration drops can be concerning based on his size, especially going into the NFL. So I'm curious to see how that is. I do have him in the top 175, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets in a little bit earlier, just based on his great special teams play and the scarcity of his style of play in this one. We have so many big boys, big X's, and things along those lines. When are people going to start looking at those little guys and those speed demons to be able to fulfill that role? And he might get drafted a little bit earlier.
Right. Absolutely. No, I agree. He also has accepted a Senior Bowl invite, so I'm very excited to see him go at it down in Mobile. But let me ask you this. If I gave you both Iowa State wide receivers, Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, and you have 1 draft pick, who you taking?
Jaden Higgins. I like Jaden Higgins.
I figured you would say that. I'm in agreement with you. I like Jaden Higgins more than you thought I was going to say no. You thought it was going to be a debate here, and we were going to turn this into First Take, Stephen A. and Cam Newton, and just no. I agree with you. I think Jaden Higgins is the better of the two, and that's not a knock on Jalen Noel. That just shows how good Jaden Higgins is.
For sure, I agree, and both are good. Both are getting drafted, and Jaden Higgins for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, and the finale, and try not to talk for like 25 minutes about him.
Right. No, I could fill up a whole podcast episode because Alec Iomanner from Stanford is my guy of this wide receiver class. This is one of those guys. I identified him very early back around Halloween that this was going to be my guy of this class. 6'2", 210. He's coming from Canada. This is a Canadian prospect, folks, by way of Stanford, of course. He accelerates very quickly, has good straight line speed, runs a 4.48 40-yard dash. Very strong hands, very competitive, has a good sense of timing, especially on his jump balls. He's got very reliable hands. He's willing to go over the middle to make those nitty-gritty catches. Very precise route runner. He can make those quick outs, those quick ins, those quick breaks. He can, very good start-stop ability. Very good in both catch and run scenarios and taking the top off of the defense, even though he doesn't have the best long speed in the world. He also has good ball tracking skills. He's not going to lose that ball over his shoulder, especially on a back shoulder throw. Some of the big knocks for him, though, he does struggle to gear down. So you see him, once he gets going, it's hard for him to stop. And part of that is he's 6'2", 210. He's a bigger guy. It's going to be hard for him to stop. He also relies too much on his physicality rather than his technique. And he's got good technique to win his one-on-one matchups. Sometimes he just wants to brute force it, which is fine now because you're playing against the future accountants of America. But when you get to the NFL and everyone's the pro, it's a problem. He's going to have to use his technique, which he has good technique. In addition to that, he is inconsistent against top-level defenders. Part of that is he's trying to use his physicality rather than use his technique. He also gets too comfortable in traffic sometimes, especially on scramble drills. His quarterback goes on a scramble drill. He's comfortable in the zone, and he's not necessarily moving it around. All that being said, this is my guy of this class. This is my wide receiver 3 on my big board behind T-Mac and Burden. Not necessarily in that order. It's actually Burden and T-Mac. He is a first-round grade wide receiver for me. Reminds me a lot of Nick Westbrook Akine from the Tennessee Titans. Same big body guy, can do everything you ask, has a couple of issues, but I think without a doubt that Iomanner is a guy that the NFL media as a whole is too low on. I know PFF, I think, had him as 27th on one of their most recent big boards. So the buzz is starting to come for Iomanner this is a guy that we're all going to be looking at, especially in February at the combine, in the one-on-one drills, that why aren't we talking about him more? He is a redshirt sophomore, so we have to temper the expectation. There is a high likelihood he could return to school. If I were him, based on the grade I give, I'd say go ahead and come on out. But that's enough of me gushing over my guy of this class. I could fill another 20 minutes of that. But Randall, what'd you see from Io Manor?
Oh yeah. Well, the funny thing is because like you had him as your guy, and then when we started talking about him, and I think we've talked about Io Manor before for sure, but I had him on my fantasy team last year, so I was well aware of Io Manor for sure, and I was excited that we got to talk to him. But I'm not going to say much across from what you said because you pretty much hit the positive and the negatives. But what really stuck out to me, other than me putting Canadian in 3 exclamation points, and you already had to say that, is his bounce back was very impressive. He had a severe knee injury in 2022. And then in 2023, he was 5th in Pac-12 receiving yards. He had a 300-yard game against Colorado. And then after that, he had 159 yards and 1 touchdown against Washington. 2 weeks later, he had 122 yards and 1 touchdown against Oregon State. So even though he had that severe knee injury in 2022, he came out like just 60 miles an hour, no matter what sort of thing. So that was impressive. And sometimes people have that recovery where you can recover much faster than others. And that would be a good possibility for him, which I do love. And then I do think that maybe a lot of people have him in that back play, but I think what a lot of people need to understand is that he has some sketchy quarterback play with him sort of thing that's not helping his case any better. And a small microcosm of it is, like the Notre Dame game was really hard to watch when he only had 3 catches. Yeah. And it was not his fault because the Stanford's offensive line couldn't handle it, and the quarterback just was terrified the whole entire time. But then if you look at a microcosm in that quarterback play versus his talent was the Syracuse game, where basically all in the first half, he had a walk-in touchdown where he separated on a go route that was overthrown to him, like overthrown by 5 or 10 yards sort of thing. So he slowed down because it was such a bad ball. But then the next drive, he had a fade expecting it to be the corner pylon, landed a couple feet out of bounds. So he couldn't grab that one either. And then they immediately went right back to him on a slot fade, and he had to complete that rub route, and he made a ridiculous one-handed catch, and it was so impressive. And then you look at the next offensive play, they went right to him again, and it was a screen pass that landed at his feet that was about 5 air yards. So he's doing what he can with what is given to him at Stanford, and I think he's doing a really good job at it. So I do believe when people start diving into him more, you'll start to see who he really is if you actually clearly watch him. And I think one of my favorite things that I think is going to be really good with the NFL, because that he will do well in the NFL, is at Stanford, he draws a lot of it. And I know people know that he's a good receiver, but he draws attention more exclusively than I've seen in a lot of wide receivers. When he's using the middle of the field on his comebacks and curls and his crossers, he's pulling safeties every single time and opening up that backfield really well. And it was impressive to watch how much of a magnet he was. And that's showing what college cornerbacks and DBs are seeing him. And that's almost more of a better scouting report than what we could do or anybody, is what the other people playing against him are doing. Yep.
No, absolutely. And the big thing about Io Manor is you hit the nail on the head. You look at the Notre Dame game and it's 3 catches, 16 yards as a stat line. So you think, oh, he's not really the greatest receiver. You dig into the tape and you see his quarterback play is rough, but there are games where even with that rough quarterback play, he's almost quarterback proof. I mean, you look at the NC State game, 4 catches, 108 yards and a touchdown, blowing by guys, but his quarterback can't make those throws.
Right.
I think if he returns next year, I think he should stick it out at Stanford, especially with Stanford just having named Andrew Luck as their new GM. I think Andrew Luck is a very good quarterback. We all know that from his time in Indianapolis and his time at Stanford. So he's going to go out and he's going to recruit through the NIL and get a good quarterback for Io Manor. Is it going to be a guy, a 5-star recruit? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know, but whoever comes in to play quarterback is going to have an elite talent in Io Manor. And this is a guy, if he comes out this year, 1st-round grade, if he goes back to school, unless something out of the ordinary happens, I don't see that happening. where he falls out of that first round grade. But let's wrap on this because we've talked about this guy before. Io Manor versus Emeka Egbuka, a guy you're higher on than I am.
So this is actually where we get to go into first take and debate, because I like Emeka not much better, because I do have Io Manor in the mid-second round. So I always have liked him. I like Emeka's competition that he's played, a little bit better than Stanford, of course. And I just think he's a little bit cleaner. I do think that they're relatively similar in how they will be in the NFL sort of thing in their roles to begin with. So I think that they're pretty similar in that regard. I like Emeka. I think he is more polished. I think he's a better blocker, and I think he can just do it all a little bit better. But we're splitting a little bit, and that you can tell me why Io Manor is better.
I was to say we're probably splitting hairs, but the thing is, we have the inverse. You have Emeka higher and then lower on Io Manor. I have Io Manor higher and lower on Emeka because I have Emeka around the same range that you have Io Manor in that early to mid part second round. But I think Io Manor, the big thing is that he's very reliable in terms of his hands. Emeka Egbuka, obviously, there's some concentration drops. Durability is the biggest knock for me on Emeka Egbuka. The consistent lower body injuries, the knee injuries, the ankle injuries, the nagging injuries that didn't want to necessarily heal. Io Manor uses his big length and wingspan, that zip code catch radius that I talked about. Emeka Egbuka has that. He just doesn't use it.
You definitely are right about that, because I feel like he just wants to be a slot guy. Like Emeka likes the slot versus Io Manor, and they're almost kind of similar size and similar styles. So like Io Manor wants to be outside while Emeka wants to be inside, sort of thing. So their thought processes are different, but they're similar people.
Right. And they're relatively similarly sized. I mean, Io Manor's 6'2", 210, Emeka's 6'1", 205. So we're talking about 1 inch and 5 pounds. It's not like comparing Io Manor to Ricky White. It's relatively the same size guys. It's just one wants to be the boundary outside. One wants to be a Batman in Io Manor, and one wants to be a Robin in Egbuka.
Right. Oh yeah.
And
I mean, that's true. And we will see. I do think that the combine will kind of either hurt or help him in those medicals, because I'm still kind of reading the medicals. I know that ankle injury, but I'm curious because I think Emeka will be a good standing point on collegiate tightrope surgery and see how that affects NFL GMs and what they think about him coming into the NFL with that tightrope surgery sort of thing. So I'm curious if he's not in. I believe if Emeka's not in the first round, then it's the medicals personally. And I know that you have him out there, so I'm curious, but that's how I believe it's going to happen. So I'm interested to see how that plays out.
No, I agree with you. I think Emeka's a very talented player. He's in my top 62. This is a guy that's not going to fall out of the second round unless the medicals are just a giant red flag.
Right.
Another big thing, the comparison between Egbuka and Io Manor. Egbuka also plays up to that slot by special teams coverage as well. Io Manor's a little bit bigger. He could play special teams if he wanted, but at 6'2", 210, this is an X-body guy. You don't really want to throw him on punt coverage. He's got the speed to do it. But Egbuka plays up in special teams very well, better than Io Manor. So I think, obviously, Io Manor's a my guy. I'm going to pound the table for him every time. My favorite spot for Io Manor that I've mocked him to recently, the Washington Commanders, even though they don't need a receiver. Put him next to Scary Terry, and it is over for AFC or NFC East defenders.
Absolutely. Terry McLaurin's one of my favorite wide receivers, and finally he's got somebody to throw to him. But yeah, they don't need it. But I mean, that's Jane Daniels. I mean, even if you take him into Tampa Bay, Baker Mayfield could use him like that as well, especially with Mike Evans getting older and Chris Godwin being injury prone and things along those lines. So I could see him working there as well. But Washington's a good one.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Washington would be a good fit for him if I had to put him there. They don't necessarily need an X receiver, so to speak, but the Chargers as well, putting him in that Jim Harbaugh kind of scheme against Lad McConkey, who's more of your slot style guy, can play the boundary, but he's more of that sneaky slot guy.
Right.
Another one that I would be curious on is Pittsburgh. I know we've talked about on this pod about Pittsburgh needing a wide receiver. Probably they'll go with somebody a little bit faster across from George Pickens. But if you wanted two towering guys, George Pickens on one side, Io Manor on the other is not a bad fit. Plus, Io Manor just seems like a guy. He just seems like a guy when you get him into an NFL locker room, he's gonna be that glue, consummate professional type of guy. This isn't a guy you're gonna have to worry about character concerns. I mean, he's from Canada and he went to Stanford. If there's character concerns, show me where, because I don't see them.
Yeah, no, definitely not. I agree completely. Cincinnati could be another one. I know we talked about that with Will Shepard. You know, they're gonna have to replace T. Higgins, and this unfortunately is a great. I mean, because Cincinnati's in the AFC, but they're at prime time to change out T. Higgins after he leaves next year in this draft.
Yes, absolutely. And we've talked about it on this pod at length too. This wide receiver class is deep. It goes deep into round, guys we talked about today that are very talented. They could be round 6 guys. They could be round 7 guys just based on how deep this class is. So this is a good year. If your NFL franchise needs a wide receiver, you are in for a good one or two.
Yeah,
I've said on X at Spark Scouting that there's no reason that you can't double dip at wide receiver in this class.
Agreed.
Absolutely. So, all right. I believe that takes us to the end. So let's wrap it up here for everybody watching. We appreciate you spending some time with us on Friday night to talk some wide receivers and some cornerbacks. As always, make sure you like and subscribe to the Draft Professor YouTube channel. We've got all sorts of NFL draft content, running backs and linebackers, edges, the guys in the trenches, wide receivers and corners. We've got scouting reports. We've got NFL analysis by all the names that you see on the slide there. Give us a follow as well on X. I am at Sparks Scouting. He is at Randall Slifer. Randall, before we send it on home for the night, you got anything you want to say to the people?
I don't know. Thanks for joining in as usual. We got a good show next week. We got 2 more or 3 more weeks of cornerbacks and wide receivers. 2 more weeks, I think.
I believe we've got 2 more weeks, and then at that point, we might be able to we might shift gears here on Friday nights and start bringing you some different content. But as always, we'll be here. We'll be going over those wide receivers, corners, and those NFL draft players that you should know about. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you.
Peace.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by Draft Professor. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please like the podcast on YouTube. Please follow us on Twitter at NFL Draft Fanatic. Thank you again for watching. On behalf of everybody that put this podcast together, we appreciate our followers very, very much, and we look forward to seeing you on a future podcast.